Thanks for joining another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Scott Warr.
And I'm Don Freeman. And today we're going to explore the intersection of endurance sports and mental toughness. We'll discuss a few principles outlined in Mark Devine's book, Unbeatable Mind. And Mark Devine is a retired Navy SEAL commander, an entrepreneur, and an author who has dedicated his life to helping people develop the mental and physical toughness needed to overcome obstacles and achieve their goals. As a SEAL, Mark learned the importance of mental toughness in the most challenging environments imaginable. After his retirement, he went to found SEALFit, a training program designed to help people develop the physical and mental toughness needed to take on any challenge. In Mark's book, he shares his insights on how to develop the mental toughness and resilience needed to overcome obstacles, achieve success, not only in life, but on the trail as well. So we're excited to talk about this, Scott. And as usual, we roundtable a chapter, and we've brought in our colleague, Adam Kimball, to help with the discussion. And I think that's where you're about to tell us about Adam, about how he's beat Killian's record running around Lake Tahoe, how he was on the Wheel of Fortune, and how he's been
Wheel
on
of Fortune. What were you on? Totally different TV show.
Wait, you was on the Prices.
Yo, this is
you were on the Wheel of Fortune.
This is actually perfect timing. No, I was on the Price is Right, Don. But I just recently, this is relevant because I just recently discovered that different people throughout the course of time have uploaded, I think, every single Price is Right episode that's ever aired on YouTube. So I used to be like looking for clips of the episode I was on, and the other day I went and looked and I found the whole episodes right there on YouTube. So that's pretty cool.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, Scott, Ryan, I think you have a new assignment.
Is it possible to put that in show notes, Scott? We have show notes, right?
We do.
Yeah,
I could give you the link. All I had to know was the episode number, which I looked up by typing in the date that the episode was filmed, which I knew. Obviously, I had to go back in my calendar. I didn't know it offhand, but found that out. Typed in the episode number, and it popped up right away.
Just send me the link. As I recall, I've seen that episode because I went searching for it when we first met you, and you look like a baby, man. You are clean shaven. And you look like you're like 15 years old.
Yeah. I also was a different physique back then. I was playing baseball at the time. So for some people, I'm pretty unrecognizable. But yeah, it is me.
Hey, I do want to mention you said the title of the book that Mark Devine wrote. The full title, I think, is worth mentioning. It's Unbeatable Mind: Forgery, Resiliency, and Mental Toughness to Succeed at an Elite Level. Now, we're not supposing that each of you that are listening to this are at an elite level. There's only one of three of us on the podcast right now that are of elite level, and that's Adam. But I think that the principles in the book can easily be adapted to and learned by all of us.
And Scott, I think that everybody listening is doing some elite things. So not everybody is out there challenging themselves and taking on some of these difficult tasks. So I think it's just right for everybody.
Yeah, I agree, Don. I actually, the timing of this was all really great. A few weeks ago, I had a speaking engagement where the theme of it was resilience. And so I went from that to then reading this book to now this chat. And one of the things that I love is you can be in an environment where you're talking about examples of resiliency, for example, in your own life. And what I always like to say to people is I'm going to apply it to some of the things that I've done and how that's played out. But that looks different in everybody's lives, right? So for some people, they're going to apply it to running. For other people, they're going to apply it to different aspects of their life. It's just the concepts are the important part and how you can use them to better yourself.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant book. And, when Don first brought me this book, I thought, another book on mental toughness? Do we have to really read another book on mental toughness? And I'm finding that there are some common threads. I mean, as I was reading the book, I was thinking about our old episodes that we three did on Stoicism and how there's some principles that these Stoics back in Roman days, these philosophers came up with that Navy SEALs are using, and that Mark Devine teaches in his book, but he brings it to, I think, a more relevant and a more current state of mind that maybe help us understand some of these principles a little bit better.
So typically we each take a chapter, correct? And we each get either assigned one or we elect one. I don't think it's ever been assigned. I think the assignment was there was only, those two were already taken. So which one am I going to take? I think that was the assignment. And so we just roundtable it. The first person that takes the chapter talks a little bit about what they found, and then it's a fun discussion, and we encourage those that are listening to join in. So where do we start?
Well, I think we should start in chronological order. If I recall from the text threads, I think I go first. I'm chapter 1. Adam's going to be taking chapter 3, and then we're fast forwarding to chapter 7, and Don's going to close the discussion out. Does that sound okay?
That sounds good. Let's do it.
All right. So a few things. I made some bullet point thoughts, and I just want to get your opinions on things. The first one that came out was the importance of preparation. So not just the physical preparation. This is a book on the unbeatable mind. So mental preparation. And he mentions even an older script from Sun Tzu, which the Art of War. If you've never read that book, you got to get that one on your bookshelf and maybe flip through it and read it. But he said this: victorious warriors win first and then go to war. Defeated warriors go to war and then seek to win. So preparation is paramount for your success. If you think that you're going to go into a distance that you've never gone and you haven't done some mental preparation, you're just decreasing your chances that you'll be able to succeed. You have to work on some of these. It's just like you would never start a 100-mile race without training your physical body or going out and doing some running. It's important that you prepare yourself and your mental self to some of these. And I think that's a great way to start the book. What do you guys think?
Well, I'll agree with you. You don't have to wait for a specific race to do that. I think we can mentally prepare for a workout. There's a lot of things that we can practice this. And probably like most things in life, you become better at what you practice. So if you want to become very accomplished at race preparation and mental preparation, start easy, start on some training regimes and think about, how am I going to handle today's workout? What am I going to be faced with? How am I going to execute when things get difficult? I think it's good time to practice. Training's for practice, for sure. Scott?
I'm curious, Adam. Have you ever attempted a training run or a FKT or a race where you didn't prepare mentally, and then juxtapose that with one that you were prepared for?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever gone into something that I cared about not having prepared at all. Sometimes you go in wishing, like, ideally you would have prepared a little better in some areas, and sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes you roll the dice on that and it plays out great. Other times not as well. But I would say that the times that I'm really locked in mentally, physically, emotionally, and one of the things that I love about this book and kind of Mark Devine's approach is he's all about the whole self and everything and how it all works together. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in my chapter, but I would say that when I feel like really good mentally, good physically, good spiritually, when all of that feels in alignment, and like I've prepared well enough in those ways, I think that's when I nail it and stick the landing. It's not always when I'm the fittest, because if there's things going on in life where I'm mentally not as prepared, or things distracting me, or whatever it may be, right? Then I think it's kind of like how you hear sometimes about I don't know, high performing, like Olympic athletes, for example. Sometimes they'll go out and win a gold medal and they're like very much not at their fittest, but they're maybe at their happiest and most balanced, and they're fit enough. Obviously you've got to be fit enough, but like they've been in better shape potentially, but they're in a really good state of mind. They're mentally prepared, they're focused, and all those things. And I think when you have, and that's what I love about this approach, when you have that kind of everything synchronized together, you tend to see really good things happen.
Yeah, that made me think of a comment, and this certainly isn't about our personal experiences and look at me, I did this. I think one of my better races is when I was not in the best shape, and I knew I wasn't in the best shape, so I really had to bring another piece of the puzzle and make it lead the way. And I was careful with execution. I didn't go out too hard. I didn't run too fast. I took care because I knew if I crashed and burned at some point during that race, I would be done. I didn't have the fitness level to come back. So I had to be cautious and careful and really execute the emotional piece through there and be careful with execution because I didn't have the reserves or the fitness level to get it done.
I as you guys are talking about that, I'm thinking of Lindsey Vonn. If you don't know who she is, one of the most winning downhill female racers, actually winningest downhill racers in the world, and she has been retired for many years and just doing her thing. And she just this year decided, at age 40, mind you, I'm going to go back and race on the World Cup. And I thought, when I heard that, I mean, she's racing against 20 and 30-year-olds, and she has the mental preparation from being one of the best downhill racers ever. And she brought that in. And I think at her first race, I want to say that she definitely was in the top 10. I think I remember her being fourth place in a first race in like years. And she's able to compete at that level. And I'm sure although she says she's in the best physical shape of her life, I don't know whether that's true or not, but I think mentally gives her the edge.
See, this is amazing. You guys know I'm all about, I love the smallness of the community and just how things work. And I love serendipitous timing. But the fact that you brought that up, Scott, is amazing, because that speaking engagement that I had a co-speaker with me. We kind of went back to back, and that was Darren Ralphs, who is a former Olympic skier, downhill racer. And in his talk, he talked about how Lindsey was starting her career again, and he knows her. And he was saying that she's in a really good place right now, physically, mentally, emotionally. And he's like, I think she's going to do really, really well because everything's in balance and she's like motivated. So I just love that you brought that up. That's so funny.
Yeah, I saw some of your social media posts, and I was thinking, I'd love to meet Darren. That would be awesome. He's a phenomenal human being.
Yeah,
I think
he is.
Hey, let's move on. One of the other things, and I know Don is just going to suck this in and raise his Freeman flag because this is what he preaches all the time, and that's one of the reasons why I put this in here. But this is the bullet point that I wrote down. When crisis arises, rather than think your way through the problem, feel your way through the crisis. Don't overthink it. Don't get paralyzed by analysis paralysis. Use your emotions and your intuition to get through the problem. Do you agree with that, Freeman? Were you listening?
I think I'm back. Yeah, Scott, you said I had a Freeman flag, and it was about having some intuition. Don't try to overthink it. Just use your instincts. I think sometimes I would raise my Freeman flag, and I have no idea what this flag looks like. Is there a star on it? Is there a stripe on it? Is there a skull on that thing? What does this Freeman flag look like? But I will say that intuition is so strong. Listening to yourself, what your body needs, whether it's slow down, whether it's fuel yourself, whatever it is. I think we get in our way sometimes trying to outthink the problem. That we need to listen to what our body's telling us and go with that and just prove it wrong. And I think you'll find that if you listen to your instincts, that will be the path to find your way through. That's what I'm thinking. Is that why you thought the flag went up, Scott?
Oh yeah.
Or is it because I don't have the ability to think through things? Which was it?
Yeah, I do think to follow up on that, Don, I think one of the things I love about in a book like this, where there's stories told about either it was kind of like how you kicked off the chapter, Scott, talking about going into war, right? I think when you hear these stories about battles and different people throughout history doing amazing things, I think one of the things that I always think about is how at different points in time, especially stuff that happened hundreds of years ago or longer, back then it was just things were much more simple. It was this is our plan. We have to execute this as flawlessly as we can and move forward. And I think now in today's world, we have access to so many things. We have so many distractions. There's just a lot of things that to Don's point, can overcomplicate the process. And so I think sometimes, and I'll talk a little bit about this in my chapter, but I think sometimes the simplicity of things is one of the most important things. You just have to, break things down to its simplest form and use that as your framework. And then, try to add in other things if they're useful, but not get caught up in the whole, oh, I've got this, and this thing to use. And it's just confusing the process instead of just, going at it and attacking the problem.
And that actually leads me to my next point, where you need to have some mental clarity. And he introduces, and I don't know if the Navy SEALs taught him this or if he came up with this analogy, but it's called the fishbowl analogy. And if you think, it's a mental clarity technique. So if you visualize your mind as a fishbowl filled with murky water, and that murky water represents clutter, negative thoughts, thoughts that are not related to the task at hand. And by focusing on your breathing, you activate a filter system within that fishbowl, and it gradually clears the water. So for each breath, you're filtering the water until the water becomes crystal clear and you can see the problem and resolve the problem. I love that visual that Mark brings up.
Yeah, I don't think you can solve difficult problems with chaos going around. You've got to try to filter it out, like you said, and handle the largest problem at a time, one thing at a time. Knock one down and go to the next. Knock one down, go to the next, and identify which one is the most difficult. What's the one that's going to take me out that I need to handle now? Because you can't solve all of them all at once. I mean, you're running down the trail. It's hard to multitask on all things. So pick the biggest one, take a victory, pat yourself on the back for solving that one, move to the next one. And have patience, because some problems have that in the equation. You need a little bit of time for whatever adjustment you make, then to take hold.
I think that's right on the money, Don. I think that in today's world where we want instant gratification, if we want to know, who played Lucille Ball's co-actor in season 3 of I Love Lucy, we can easily and quickly find that information out. I think that we need to realize that some problems cannot be solved as easy as looking up episodes of I Love Lucy.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you, Adam. Adam said, hey, let me go next, because I think what he's about to say is, so funny you said that, because I was just watching I Love Lucy. Go ahead, Adam.
Old episodes of I Love Lucy.
Was a great show, but no, I wasn't just watching it. What I was going to say is, I don't know about you guys, but again, I kind of see it as almost like a mental training exercise, which is why I'm bringing it up. But whenever I think of something and I know the answer is deep in my subconscious somewhere, I always try my best to dig it out without looking it up. I don't know about you guys, but whenever there's something like that, I'm like, I know I'm going to do my best to think of it. And then eventually, if I don't, I'll look it up. But fun little training exercise.
It's actually I think for me, a lesson or a practice of mental control where I go, I'm not going to touch my phone. I'm going to see if I can remember this.
Yeah.
So I had a thought, Scott, when you said that, if you'll let me go ahead and say that if we're experiencing a problem in the middle of a run, whatever, if it's a training run or a race, many times it's multi-layered. There's more than one reason that it's happening. And since we can only solve one thing at a time to focus on it, we need to identify that number one problem and take a victory when we identify that one. So when things are going south, there's probably multi layers to it, and we had better identify the one that can make an impact and then move to the next and then move to the next, because there might be 3 things to solve, and we can get frustrated and lose our enthusiasm when we try to think that we can solve them all at one time. So find out that one thing and take that victory.
Yeah, I was just reminded of in the book, he tells a story, and he uses a term. Maybe one of you guys will remember it. If you do, please share it. But he uses a term where he talks about kind of like almost stepping out of yourself and looking at a situation, like looking at yourself in a situation. And he uses a term for that. It's
Witness.
His witness. Yes, that's it. But he tells a story about he's in. Where was he? I want to say he was somewhere in Southeast Asia, and it was late at night. I think he was on a deployment. But he was just out by himself, and he was walking home, and he was in like a dark alley, and these 2 gentlemen approached him, and it seemed like they were going to try to mug him, and he kind of was just like, "Hey, I'm like a highly trained person. This is going to be bad for you if you do this." And then the guys left him alone, and they went on. But it made me think, like with the fishbowl idea, I think it's sometimes you have to kind of take a step away from yourself and say, because in the moment, I think when you do have that dirty fishbowl, it can just feel chaotic and overwhelming. And to
Right.
Don's point, when it's chaotic, things aren't going to go well. So sometimes you have to take that deep breath. You have to take a step back and observe what's happening for a minute and say, okay, how can I clear the fishbowl, and then figure out the best way forward.
Adam, you've accomplished some amazing things, and I imagine during some of those amazing things, you've had some negative thoughts, some negative chatter, some difficulties. How do you dig yourself out of that moment? Because it's not all rainbows and butterflies all the time.
That's a great point, Don. I feel like actually the tool that I use the most, that's the most valuable, is something I wish I would use more in my everyday life, and I just tend to not access it as much. And that's just focusing on the present. So something's not going well. Okay, well, right now in this moment, what can I do to try to positively influence that moving forward? And so if it's out on a run and I'm bonking and things are going poorly, okay, do I need to get to the next aid station and fix this? Do I need to drink right now? Do I need to take in calories? Do I need to get a rock out of my shoe? What is it that I need, that I can do right now that's going to help me? And sometimes I think in the kind of like busyness of daily life, I wish I would do that more, and I don't. And then when I'm in when I'm on the brink in a race or in something that's really stressing me, it's like an automatic response. I just go to it. But that's kind of my biggest tool that I use.
Yeah, it made me think, as you're saying that, you really can't solve that number one problem when you're worrying about all of them at once.
Yeah,
you've got to focus.
Yep.
And I think from a trail perspective, if you're having one of those times, probably the best thing to do is to slow things down. Quit running, go to a walk, or maybe find a log and sit down and do the fishbowl technique. Do some breathing, clear the water, get the murk out of the water, and then make a decision and say, okay, using that intuition, what does my body need right now to get me up off this log? And then go, what does my body need to get me to the next aid station? And I think that those are very, very good techniques to use.
Yeah, and to that point, Scott, if you are sitting down on the log, that can be your opportunity to have that witness sitting next to you saying, yes, this is the problem. We need to focus on this right now, and then worry about the other stuff later.
And it's almost as if this episode is scripted, which it is not,
as you can tell.
But the next point, I actually have 2 more points to make, but I want to give you guys fair time to talk about yours. But I think it is very important to talk about this 4-step process where the first item in the process or first action is witness. And what you're doing in witness is you're observing your thoughts and your emotions without judgment. All you're doing is sitting down and thinking about what's going on. What emotions do you have? What are you thinking about? And don't judge them. Just recognize them. And that then allows you to recognize whether they're negative thoughts or positive thoughts. And one of the interesting things is, if you try this, Mark says that you'll be surprised how frequently negative thoughts easily crop up. negative thoughts in your mind much quicker than positive thoughts. So the part of witness is just to stop and think about what emotions and feelings you're having. The second step is to interdict. Once you've identified those negative thoughts, immediately halt it by using some kind of a power command like Mark comes up with. He says you could easily say, or in your mind, or maybe even it's better to say it aloud, stop, no more. And that's the interdict step. Then you go to step 3, which is redirect. After you've stopped the negative thought, then you consciously shift your focus to a positive or constructive thought. This could be, involving, getting to the next aid station. That's your positive thought. Or, you know what, I'm lucky I have 2 legs and I can be out here running. I could be at home watching some kind of a
I
boring,
Love
boring
Lucy.
trilogy or another I Love Lucy episode. So then you redirect those to a positive thought. And the fourth step is to maintain. So sustain that positive focus by continually engaging in practices that reinforce that constructive thinking. So the 4-step process: witness. Then as soon as you get all those thoughts, then you do the stop, the interdict, he calls it. Stop it. Tell yourself right away, stop. Then you redirect those to positive thoughts, and then you maintain those positive thoughts.
Adam, I said I had something to say, but then I didn't see. Did you wave me off, or
No,
are you ready
you're
for
good.
me to say?
You're good, Don. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Ryan, you could probably find this in 12 other podcasts where I've said this, so I probably shouldn't need to repeat it. But the word witness made me think of the comments that I've shared in the past. If we were all standing at a starting line, but we weren't in control of our race, but we were simply an avatar, and somebody else was sitting at home, and they were running the race for us, deciding the pace, deciding when to drink, deciding how long to stay at an aid station. If someone that wasn't emotionally attached to this racer would make very sound decisions, I think we get in our way many times, and we make decisions that are more emotional based or ego based or race based. I want to chase this person. What do I need to do? This last year I was much faster than this. That wouldn't enter the head of this person running the avatar. And the avatar person is seeing how many hearts they have left for life, what's their energy stores, what's the distance left. They'd be doing some very, very sophisticated math and decision making without the emotional piece. And I think we sabotage ourselves quite a bit of running our own race. Sometimes we need to be a witness and step back and execute soundly.
Hey, Don, were you a gamer?
No, I've never, I've dropped maybe
Pac-Man?
50 cents. That's what I was going to say. 50 to 75 cents into a Pac-Man machine in my life. That's it.
See, it is scripted. This episode is scripted. I was going to say an interesting thought that just came up as Scott was talking about the process there, specifically the interdiction part. I think it's funny how sometimes you can be, I'll give you an example of a time when it just can happen naturally. And I think your point is about we need to figure out a way to harness it and have a word or whatever that can get us to kind of focus. But just yesterday, I was running on a bike path with my son in the stroller, and I was feeling fine. It wasn't like feeling terribly, but I could have been feeling better, And then I go to pass. There were 2 women who were walking with an elderly gentleman who it was clear he couldn't walk very well. They were walking very slowly and they were helping him, right? And as I went by, it seeing him out there doing that immediately raised my spirits and made me felt stronger. So I went from this I was feeling kind of meh, okay, and then all of a sudden I felt great just seeing what he was trying to do. And I think that was sort of an unplanned interdiction of just something in my periphery got my attention, got me to refocus. And so I think that just made me think if we can harness that power and have a way to bring ourselves to that, even when there's not something like that out on the trail, I think that could be a really powerful tool.
Yeah, I like that. That's kind of like a shock interdiction, where these others are a mental exercise or something where you actually have to create your own interdiction. this is a shock interdiction. And we see that a lot out on the trail, where you run into somebody in a race. You may run into somebody that's doing amazing things, or an aid station worker that shocks you out of those negative thoughts and brings positivity back into your thoughts.
Mhm.
So I like that it can be self interdiction or it can be shock interdiction. I'm going to see if Mark wants to add that to his 4th edition of the book.
And it would be nice if we could package that up in a foil package where we could reach into our pack and pull it out and say, I think I need some shock interdiction right now. I think I'll take 2.
Don, for a very reasonable price of $2.99, I can follow you along at races and be shock interdiction wherever you need me. So just let me know.
Appreciate
You
it.
see Adam running down the trail with a cattle prod. Stop those negative thoughts. Stop those negative thoughts. All right, enough of that. That's chapter 1. There's so much more just in chapter 1 about the 4 P's and the one thing. That's kind of a little teaser there, so that when you go get the book and you need to listen to that could change your life. But Adam, you skipped chapter 2, not literal. I mean, you read it, but you skipped to that and said, I want to do chapter 3.
And before you go to chapter 3, Adam, I want to take you back to the log that you're sitting on, Scott, because I just want to represent the fact that you don't have to sit on the log. You can drop your pace by 10%. There's a lot of things that you can do before the log comes into play. So a lot of adjustments.
I mentioned walking. I mentioned slowing down.
Yeah, well, if there was just one other listener that was kind of where I was, that Scott's going to just go to the log and suggest the rest of us do too. But now it's clear that you didn't mean that.
But that's actually a great point, though. I think another important aspect of that and a piece of that is for people to recognize that the manner in which you carry that out is different for everybody, right? So I think sometimes we get in the habit of seeing someone who's successful doing something and then trying to emulate that or copy that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we also have to realize that we are our own individuals that have our own bodies and everything's different. So you need to figure out what it is for you. That's the best thing. Some people would never want to sit down because they couldn't get back up. Some people sitting down gives them that mental break, and that's a good thing. So.
And some people might feel defeated because they're doing it, but it's just like we say that fast hiking is a strategy. And so sometimes taking a moment on that log can be a strategy, as long as you come off it better and not defeated.
Exactly.
All right, we're ready to go to chapter 3. Sorry to bring us back to the Scott's log, but go ahead, Adam.
No, perfect. So chapter 3 was titled Self-Mastery, and kind of similar to Scott, I just made a few notes that I thought were really interesting and pertinent and would be good for this discussion. So first of all, he starts the chapter by giving a quote from James Allen, which says, "The outer conditions of a person's life will always be found to reflect their inner beliefs," which I thought was a interesting kind of snapshot into how we behave and the things that we do in life. Then he moves into, and this is something that he talks a lot more about in a different chapter. I forget which chapter. Hopefully it's not 7, Don. But I'm just going to touch on it. He talks about the 5 mountains, and basically self-discipline or self-mastery, is represented by traveling these 5 mountains. And those mountains are the physical mountain, the mental mountain, the emotional mountain, the intuition mountain, and the Kokoro mountain. And the only one I'm going to say a little bit more about right now is the Kokoro mountain. And what that is Kokoro is a Japanese word, and it means to merge one's heart and mind into action. And so this particular mountain is about developing a connection with your spirit, learning to lead and act with your heart, and authentically connecting with others while striving for an integrated consciousness that benefits all mankind. So one of the reason I wanted to mention that one specifically is it goes back to what I was talking about before. I love Mark Devine's kind of all-encompassing approach. Like, he recognizes that this isn't a singular faceted thing. Having an unbeatable mind requires all these different prongs, and it actually, you guys know I do this basically every episode that we record, especially when we're doing books. But I'm going to call back to a different episode of ours, so get the show notes ready here, guys. But the episode that we did on Outlive, the book by Peter Attia, one of the things I loved about Peter Attia was that he was very he wasn't absolutist, right? He was, these are the things that I think can help, and here you need to find your way through them. It's not, this is the way to do it and this is the way not to do it. He kind of had an all encompassing, all of these things are going to help you, right? I think he talked a lot about like, some people are gym heads where they're just strength training, strength training, strength training. Some people only want to run. And Peter T is like, no, if you want to be the healthiest version of yourself, you have to do both of those things, right? And I think Mark Devine is the same way. He's calling out this Kokoro because it's the representation that you have to have this balance in order for things to really be going well and for you to maintain that self mastery. Okay, so then he talks about some of the disciplines of self mastery, and so we'll dive into those real quick. The first thing that he talked about was simplicity. So he said, always be asking yourself these two questions. Do I really need this now? Like, can I do without this particular thing? And what can I get rid of or let go of now? And so I think I thought to myself, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about this, but I thought to myself, when I'm in a race or on a training run, there's going to be a time when you're having a battle in the mind. And so I think for me, I'm moving forward. One thing that I'm going to pull from this is I'm going to ask myself in those moments, what is something that I can let go of right now? Is there something I'm upset about that I'm in a race, I'm heading towards an aid station. Did I miss a turn? And now I'm upset about those bonus miles that I ran. Can I let go of that and free myself and just move forward? What do you guys think?
Well, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking of two separate but related ideas. One is, there's been a movement, I think, I'm not an interior designer, but there's a movement of minimalism, of getting rid of things that you don't need. In fact, I think my wife has implemented some of these where you go into your closet and you look at things like a sweatshirt that you haven't worn for a year, and you look at it and you thank it for its purpose, and then you recycle it, donate it. So I'm thinking of that, and the reason, and I think they've done some research on this. When you adopt a minimalist lifestyle, your happiness increases. So I'm thinking of that, and then at the same time, I'm thinking of seeing some runners out racing. When you're volunteer for a race, you get to see a lot of different runners in a lot of different spaces. And I think about that one runner that comes in with a handheld water bottle and a pair of shorts and shoes. I'm thinking of like Anton Krupicka. That's the idea I have. And then you think on the extreme opposite, where you see someone come in and they have a hydration pack that weighs as much as their Volvo car, and they have jackets and
Tents.
bars and everything in that jacket. And I'm just thinking, who is having more fun? And and this is a judgment call on my part, but I'm just thinking, I think that you can be more efficient and enjoy the journey more when you're doing it with less clutter. So that's my thought.
I agree. One quick follow-up to that.
Don's disagreeing with his look. Well, go ahead, Don.
I'm trying to support the person that is carrying everything in REI in his pack. Okay. I'm trying to support that, but maybe that's where his happiness is. And maybe that's where his security is. And he needs that to have happiness going down the trail, that at any given moment, he could establish a town and a city at that spot. And so maybe don't take his joy, Scott. Let him be him.
The joy comes from being prepared and knowing that at any given moment he can set up camp and live for a month.
No, a lifetime, and his children's lifetime.
Yeah, and to the point, and again, we always acknowledge this, but none of this stuff is universal for everybody. And if you think that, I disagree with you. But I will say, several years ago, my wife and I, we traveled internationally for a year. We quit our jobs, traveled. It was before I lived in Tahoe. And during that year, we had these Osprey backpacks, and that was it. We had one backpack each, and we traveled for the entire year. So we had 3 sets of clothes or whatever it was, and I gotta say, it was the most free I had ever felt. There's something liberating about being minimalist, not having all this clutter. And I think it goes back to what we said before about like the preparation hundreds of years ago, where it's just very simple and straightforward. I think sometimes there's a joy in the simplicity of things.
Did your wife ever say, "Are you wearing those pants again?"
We moved around to places so much so that people wouldn't know we only had a couple pairs of clothes. Yeah.
That's a good point. I like that. What was it called again? The Japanese word?
Kokoro.
Kokoro.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay, so then the next piece that he speaks about when it comes to the disciplines of self-mastery is dedication. And you may remember this, but he tells a cool story about his first ever jump. It was kind of in like the early dawn hours, so it's dark. They were doing when he was with the SEALs, they were doing a jump out of an airplane, some kind of a training drill. And it was his first time doing it, pitch black. He's flying through the air, twisting all around, and he said he looks over at his the leader of the group. His name was Mike Liu, I think. And he looks over at him, and he's kind of just like pencil diving, flipping around, and just like totally calm and in control of everything. And Mark Devine said when he was watching that, he was like, I knew I was witnessing mastery. But then he points out, he's like, he wasn't just born with that. He had to develop that over hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of these jumps. But he developed this body and mind control to be able to be flying through the air at however many miles per hour they're flying and be totally calm. And it just reminded me, it kind of goes back to the discussion that we had earlier at the start of the show, where it's preparation, right? Where this dedication is sort of synonymous with preparation, where this guy was exemplifying this dedication to a craft, but it was because he had prepared himself so well over the course of time to make something difficult look easy. And it just made me think about our dedication to our craft and how we can improve in small ways, whether it's as a runner, whether it's at work, whether it's in family life. I think just recognizing that self-mastery requires putting yourself in these positions over and over and over again. You're not just going to be a master all of a sudden. You have to go through the motions time and time again.
I like that, Adam. And I'm not claiming to be a master trail runner at all, but I've been in both set of shoes. I've been in the chaos guy that's spinning around trying to figure out where the earth is and where the sky is and where I should be. I've been that guy. And I've also been in control, although a brief moment, of yes, chaos is going around, but I'm in control of the chaos. And I think that I like that image that you created about falling from the sky. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, but I'm the one that's going to find where the right position is to come down. Scott?
How do you do that, Don? Is it just miles and time on trail? Or do you have a specific strategy to get to shift from one to the other?
Well, I started the comment saying I'm not the master at doing this, and just by circumstance, I did land in a spot where I was in control for a moment, but I've got to say it's from practice. It's just from being there and seeing, you know what, this eventually, at some point, my head is going to be facing the sky, and my feet are going to be looking towards the ground as I'm skydiving here. Things will set themselves right. I just have to be patient for the body to twist, and when I see that, then I stabilize myself and I'm there. And I've got to think that's the same with running down the trail with chaos going on. At some point, things are going to start because, things come and go. This too shall pass. We've all been through that. I just need to ride this out till things get better. And then I'm going to stabilize and not make that same mistake I must have made a few moments ago to put me in that spot.
One of the great things of living life, whether that's on the trail or off, is that we can learn principles from other people and then try to implement those so that we're failing faster and failing forward. And I think as I was reading this book, one of the things that I've mentioned a gazillion times on the podcast is something that Brian Contosh, or Tosh, taught us. And specifically, I think he was looking at me and teaching me. And that was, if something is going bad, give it a defined amount of time and think about it, worry about it, cuss it out, cry, yell, scream, but it gets a defined time and then move on. Kind of like that interdiction that we talked about earlier that Mark brings up in the book. I think it's just written in different words, but I think that specific paradigm or thought process has helped me in my running and in life probably more than anything. And I wouldn't have discovered that as quickly or as effectively as if I wasn't listening to Tosh talk about it. And so that's why, frankly, we review a lot of these books and we talk amongst it, and we go on trail runs and talk to each other, as hopefully we can learn from each other and then do the experiment of one. Like Adam said, one's person's success is maybe not the same as the others, but you can learn from someone and try something and see if it works for you.
Yeah, one last comment too on the dedication and how that relates to self mastery. This was in a different chapter. I can't remember again which one, but he mentions, and again, this isn't for everybody, but I've found benefit in doing visualization when it comes to things. So just visualizing yourself out on a run, crossing a finish line, whatever it may be. He uses the example in the book of shooting a basketball. They've actually done studies that have shown that there can be a greater impact on somebody visualizing themselves making a shot than on making the shot itself. And it's because when you visualize something, you can make it happen, right? Whereas like you might go and shoot the shot and it doesn't go in. You can keep shooting and that's going to make it better. And so I think what's the interesting point here, I think, is that if you can positively visualize something enough, in addition to getting yourself out there and doing the thing, those two things in tandem, I think, can have a lot of effectiveness.
I can't remember if it's in the book Man's Search for Meaning or another book, but it was about a POW that was, just in a horrific state for years. And the way that he disassociated was he would play golf. And when he finally was released from, do you have that?
POW golf. Go ahead. Tell the story, Scott.
Crazy.
So when he was finally released from prison, he went out and he golfed, and he had a fantastic round of golf. And someone was asking me, how, after all these years of not playing golf, did you have such a great round? And he looked and he said, actually, I didn't. He said, I haven't three putted for the last 4 years. So the visualization of it was almost as effective as doing the act.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry to take your thunder there, Freeman.
No, you told it better than I did. I'm glad I didn't step into that puddle. So well done.
Don, I'm going to need a little more info. How did you have that written down? That's crazy.
Scott and I have run too much.
Oh, that's amazing. But again, I think to me, the important part of that is you have to get yourself out there. One other quick example, when I started doing motivational speaking, I think that was in 2016. I remember my very first talk. I was thinking about what I was going to say. I was double thinking about what I was going to say. I was totally in my head before the start of the talk. And now I go up there, I know what I'm going to say. And I still might get a little bit nervous, but I've done it so many times now that it's just second nature. And I think when it comes to anything in life, if you do it enough, you're going to get more comfortable with it, and that's going to increase your confidence, and it's just going to make everything go that much smoother. So,
I've got I really liked your review on that. I want to go back to the gear comment about the person that either is running a pair of shorts and minimalist shoe, Anton.
Don's finally figured out his argument.
No, I just have an additional comment to make.
Oh, okay.
And the REI sponsored athlete that is moving down the trail with all the inventory and full sizes for his future family that he's going to establish.
Sink, kitchen sink.
Yep. And I want to talk about, there's a lot of gear with that athlete. I want to talk about emotional baggage, because even the minimalist runner could be carrying a lot of emotional baggage. So how much emotional baggage are we carrying? Self-doubt, I'm not fit right now. There's a lot of stuff going on at work. My relationship is this, and I think my knee is really bothering me, and I'm just anticipating it's going to just give out anytime. How much emotional stuff are we carrying with us? And we need to unload that pack too.
Fishbowl it, man.
Get a filter.
Fishbowl.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my new key word out on the trail, Freeman. Whenever I'm having a bad day, I'm gonna go fishbowl.
But again, I think, just to Don's point, Mark Devine continues to remind us that it's not just about the physical, it's not just about the mental, it's not just about the emotional, it's all of those things together,
Yeah, we've talked about it and been told many, many times that emotional baggage can be heavy. And I didn't really think that was true. I was in denial of that. I was thinking, come on, you just got to buck up, you just got to get tough. Emotional baggage. What is that? Sounds like some crazy talk, but it's not. It's real. I've had some emotional baggage. As anybody that lives long enough is going to get the opportunity to look around and pick up a bag that has emotion in it. And it's true. It can slow you down. It can wear you out. It can be like dragging a tire up a hill with slick mud, on the hill itself. Emotional baggage is serious.
Yeah, it is. And you know what, Don? I like to tell people this. I am, some men in particular aren't as comfortable with this. I am not afraid to get emotional and cry over things. And I tell people that crying is one of my superpowers, because when you are feeling that deep emotion, sometimes you just need to release it, and bottling things up like that has never worked for me. So I know not everybody is as comfortable with that, but I found it to be really therapeutic and helpful.
We may need to have you write a book and address and sign a copy for me, because I am the exact opposite. And it's like a shaken up bottle of soda. When it finally pops, boy, it's not pretty, and everybody gets wet.
No, Scott, I think it's actually the Coke bottle with Mentos in it.
That's a better analogy of my emotions.
Oh man. Okay, I'll cruise through these last two so that we can get to Don's chapter. So the last two things are, he talked about authenticity, and just how living authentically begins with connecting at a heart level and discovering what drives you. Again, he goes back to the 3 P's in your one thing, which we'll let our listeners here go and read more about that, because it's a really important part of this book. But again, I just think authenticity is one of those things where in my opinion, the people that are living their best lives and that other people are seeing and saying, wow, they've really, like, whatever they're doing it right. Those are the people that are being authentic to what drives them, what they believe, their passions. And I think that's really important. And then the last thing, and I think one of the two of you might have mentioned this earlier in the episode, but he talks about writing your own script. And maybe it was Don that said something about this, and how sometimes we can be living a life that was written by somebody else, in a sense, instead of capturing the power ourselves. And I just had to share this. You guys might remember this, but I just had to share this story because I think it perfectly exemplifies how somebody can take control of a situation and how they can let it drown them. And so the story goes something like this. It says, a reporter was writing a story about the achievements of one twin who had clawed his way out of poverty and depression to achieve great success. The reporter asked the man, to what do you attribute your accomplishments? And he responded, I had no choice, you see. I had to find a way up and out because my father was a horrible alcoholic and abused me and my brother. I knew that if I didn't work hard and seek a better life, I'd become just like him. So curious about the fate of the other twin, the reporter tracked him down. He found him destitute, living on the streets. The reporter asked the same question. The response was, I had no choice, you see. I was doomed because my father was a horrible alcoholic who abused me and my brother. I didn't stand a chance. So 2 people in the same situation, one of them said, I have to make this better. The other one said, I'm going to let this defeat me. And I just think being the author of your life, we're not in control of everything. In fact, we've talked a lot about this before. There's a lot of things outside of our control on a run or in life. But when it comes to the things that are within your control, trying to take the wheel and drive in the direction that you want your life to go in, I think is really important.
Man, what a great story. Thanks for sharing that. I don't know if I've ever heard that.
It makes me think of the such stories that we want to hear from other trail runners, and we like to tell to other trail runners, is climbing out of adversity. We don't want to hear this story. The race went perfect, and it's like I was on a cloud the whole time, and some aid stations I blew by because I just didn't need them. I mean, no, I don't want to hear that story. I want to hear the story about Scott sitting on that log with his big pack that has all the REI stuff on it, and somehow he got up off that thing and still finished the race. Now, that's the story I like to hear and tell.
With Mentos soda pop sprayed all over the trail.
Don, back in 2016 was the year that I ran across the U.S. I was trying to break the record. I didn't do it. I had all kinds of physical issues. And after the fact, it occurred to me that we had way more people following and supporting our journey because I was struggling. And I genuinely feel that if I had gone through and broken the record and had kind of a superhuman feat, I don't think as many people would have been interested. So, like, truly, I think because I was struggling but kept moving and our team was rallying around me, I think people were more attracted to that because they could relate to it instead of just somebody going and doing a thing and it worked out,
It's the hero's journey. It's what people love to hear because they have problems too, and they want to have hope that, heck, if Adam can do it, then I'm going to do the same thing. We need that type of support and example.
Don and I have run too many trials together. The first thing that came to my mind was the word hope. And that gives you hope because the rest of us are going to have bad times or we're going to suffer. We need that hope that it can be done. All right. Should we jump into chapter 7 and give you a few minutes?
Yeah. I can get this done fairly quickly because I don't have a whole lot to say probably, but he defines in chapter 7 mental toughness. We talk about it a lot, and we talk about it so much that I think I even failed to provide a definition, but I liked his simple definition that developing mental toughness is the ability to consistently perform at a high level, even in the face of adversity, challenge, or uncertainty. And I added, for trail runners, this could be during fatigue, during pain, during negative mental chatter. That's when mental toughness really needs to take center stage, and we need to nail that down and remove those things one at a time because you can't do it all at once. Scott?
I think it was I'm trying to remember what chapter, it may have been in the introduction, because I often interchange these terms, mental toughness and mental control. Can you define what your definition is, Don, is there a difference between mental toughness and mental control? Does one precede the other?
Was it the WWF where the fighter out there would run over to the corner and tag his partner? Well, Adam, I just tagged you.
Yeah, that's a great question, Scott. I think to me, I think the control precedes the toughness because you have to first, it's kind of like back to the fishbowl. You have to first clear the fishbowl, have the mental control to say, okay, now what happens next? And then I think the toughness is then enduring that next part, whatever it is that comes. That's how I think of it.
Yeah, I was going through the 4-step process that he talks about in chapter 1, and the last step is maintain. It takes mental control to get through the first 3, to think about, let those thoughts and emotions enter, then to switch it off, then to replace them with positive thoughts, and then that's when the mental toughness kicks in to maintain those positive thoughts. I think that's my definition after reading this book, the difference between the two.
Good. Chapter 7 is a good one. And one of the things that he brings up and that I like to think about, talk about, and hopefully exercise is the role of self-awareness of where am I right now? Physically, emotionally, to plug in, as Adam said earlier, into present time consciousness. Where am I physically right now? Don't project the finish line. Don't look back to the start line, but where am I right now? Can I can I continue this pace? Can I continue this effort that I'm in? Is the heat going to, is this going to cripple me? Is there something that I can do to change it? Self-awareness. And it makes me think of the story. And once again, Ryan, go back to 12 other podcasts where I said this, to be honest with yourself. And I remember running this race and going at a pace and thinking, things are going real well and I'm moving faster than I probably should, but I feel good. And then I had self-awareness and I thought, you know what? But I can't hold this to the end. Physically, the math will not work out. This is not possible for me to do this. I better back off. Self-awareness. You need to be able to, I think, when you're in the middle of something, be able to project forward and determine whether it's realistic or not based on self-awareness. Adam?
Yeah, you just made me think another thing that Mark Devine talks a lot about is humility. And to me, I think self-awareness and humility are synonymous in that sometimes you have to acknowledge, okay, this is what's happening, instead of sort of lying to yourself in a sense. Because the lying to yourself is kind of like a Band-Aid that eventually is going to pop off and there's going to be more problems. Whereas if you are genuinely honest with yourself and you say, this is where I'm at, then you can address what needs to be addressed and then hopefully better yourself later on.
As you bring that up, I'm thinking we oftentimes don't attribute a Navy SEAL with the term humble.
Mm.
We think of them as mentally tough, physically tough. But I think that you bring something up that maybe the picture that we're seeing on TV and in movies of Navy SEALs is not the true picture of a real warrior, that a true warrior does have a strong dose of humility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he gave in the book, in a different chapter, he gave an example of, there was a SEAL mission where the SEALs carried out the mission and then like it should have been this huge thing and they just kind of like left and there was no media around it. They just did the job and left. And he's like, that's the true embodiment of it. It's not, you're not doing this for other people to see it. You're doing this to fulfill the mission.
And I remember that part of the book that you're referring to, and it's because they had practiced it over and over. This was just like another day at the office. It wasn't a high five moment at the end. They had lived this a number of times.
It was just another execution of the plan that they've done 100 times.
Yeah. And I think another thing for me, kind of tying back to the question we were talking about earlier with what do you do when you're in the moment and you're trying to problem solve? It goes back to, I think it ties into what Don's talking about right now with mental toughness. For me, and I'd love to hear if you guys are the same way. I do this all the time. When I'm struggling with something, whether it's in a race or otherwise, I then pull out of the well, I pull other experiences that I've already been through. I said, hey, remember this? That was worse than this right now, right? And I think, and again, it goes back to the putting yourself in these situations, then you have so much more to draw from later on. And I pull those things out all the time because I say, when you're doing something hard, sometimes you got to remind yourself you've done this before.
I quickly remembered something that Don and my good friend, Jeff Abel, who unfortunately passed away from cancer, and he'd be in the hospital bed, been gone through some procedures and chemo and just miserable pain. And he'd look at me and he goes, it's just mile 70, Scott. It'll get over. Yeah. I'll make it through. The finish line's right ahead. And I remember that's what he drew upon. And one of the things that we as runners, when we do tough things, we can draw upon in our personal lives. I love it.
That's a great example.
I want to bring that comment back that I mentioned a moment ago and present it to both of you, because we all have, everybody listening, including us on the podcast, we all have a PR of some kind. I mean, just by definition, you've got to have your personal best at some point, even if it's slow, it doesn't matter, your personal best. That when I said you've got to have self-awareness and ask yourself, can I continue at this pace? Yes or no? Should I slow down or should I back off a little bit? Should I change what I'm doing so I can make it? Do you think that self-sabotages you? Do you think maybe I'll never find my personal best because I haven't taken a chance? I haven't pushed hard enough. I haven't just let it roll all the chips forward, spin those dice, and hopefully it comes up 7. Do you think that's a self-sabotage? Or do you think sometimes you just need to take a chance and take the risk and let it go?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
I think it can be sort of self-sabotaging, self-fulfilling in a way. And I think one thing that I've done with races in the past is, not always, but sometimes, say like a 50K distance, for example, I'll sign up for a race that is not an important race to me, and then just gas pedal, see what I can do. If I blow up, I blow up, you know? And it's more just it's both an opportunity to see what you're capable of, and then also an opportunity to work on your problem solving if it doesn't go well. And so I think sometimes, and this is something that Mark Devine references too. He talks about how like the greatest leaders and people that have the best self-discipline and self-mastery always have an element of humor to what they're doing. He's like, I think he gave an example. He said a lot of people see Navy SEALs and they think that they're just like serious all the time. And he's like, it's far from the truth. They're joking around, having a blast. And he said the important part about that is that it keeps things light. So you can be focused on a task, but also keep things light and have fun with it. And I think sometimes when we are signed up for races, we just take it so seriously that it can suck the fun out of it sometimes. And so it can be good to just sign up for a race and say, let's see what happens, and don't get attached to it, just go and see what you can do.
I think that's what training is for. Training is for going and putting the gas to the floor and seeing how far you can go at that speed before you blow up. So I think that's what's training for. And sometimes you got to do that in a race. And if it's a long enough race, you can blow up and then come back and finish the race. And when I say come back, I mean come back from blowing up, not from the car.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that he brought up in the book, is putting yourself in that position before you're actually in that actual position of training and creating some hardships so you can learn to work through them, so you can learn to find how do you get out of this situation. And I've heard that even early on. It's like, oh, such and such, he doesn't eat anything or drink anything, and he puts a rock in his shoe, and then he gets some sandpaper between his thighs and gets some chafe itch. I mean, he's going to live every possible thing that can happen to him on a race. And he does this so he's prepared and ready and he can solve problems. I don't think that's a good idea. And we shouldn't cause injury to ourselves, putting ourselves in hardship. But I think there's a place for it to, put the throttle down completely so you can see what happens at this pace. How long can I sustain this before just, inevitable chaos happens and I find Scott's log?
I think that's a great point, Don. Another thing about, I think, mental toughness and mental training is you have to pick your spots. If you're constantly digging holes trying to get out of them, at some point you're just going to wear yourself down, I believe. So I think it's important to work on those things so that when the time comes, you're ready. If you just keep grinding yourself down, you're just going to be worn out. Like I think pick your spots, do it wisely, and really focus on improving.
Good. Hey, how often do you find yourself in and we're talking to veteran runners now. How often do you find yourself in one of those spots, a bunk spot? Because after all these miles, you've learned to read it early. Oh, I can see this is coming. In the very beginning, it was like, man, I turn a corner and bang, there was Bonkville. But as you have a lot of experience, you can go, oh, I think Bonkville's about 3 miles ahead. I better make some adjustments. So how often do you find yourself in Bonkville on a training run? Do you avoid them? Are you so experienced now that you just steer away from them?
Yeah, sometimes I'll intentionally do it. Again, not a lot, but sometimes I'll just go out with limited to no fuel just to try to help my body get some different adaptations and deal with it, so that if I screw it up in a race, it doesn't totally shut me down, you know? But other times, I think, to your point, Don, I think it's easier to avoid once you start to know your body and know the signs and can pick it up. And I think it's easier to screw it up in races than it is on training runs, because in races, there's so many things you're focused on, whether it's you want to do well in the race, there's these people running around you, there's your crew that you're seeing, you're at aid stations saying hi to volunteer. You know, there's just a lot of extra things that can distract from what you need to do. Whereas on a training run, it's usually a little more straightforward in my experience. So I think that's why people can mess up the race day more, because there's just more things happening around them.
Yeah, I like your approach to that. I think that during training runs we can focus a little bit more, but during racing there are a lot of things that are making noise around us, so we can't listen to those subtle cues. No, we talked in the past, and people talk about it, is monitoring your thirst so you don't become hydrated. It's like, oh, that runner's coming in, he's got nothing but salt on him and he's cramping up and he hasn't had any fluid. But he had a lot of clues before that happened, right? So you drink early, drink often was part of the equation, but learning to listen to where the thirst request comes from your body before you need it. You've needed a steady stream all the way through. You're getting clues that you've needed it, but you're distracted and you're not listening. You got to listen to those early cues of, hey, now it's time for water. You're not actually thirsty at that point. Your mouth isn't dry, but your body needs this. So are you paying attention to those subtle cues? Can you hear it? Or do you have to wait for the cramp to be the announcement that you need fluid? You've got to start listening early. There's some comments are showstoppers. That's one right there. Just boom.
I was just pondering, you posed the question, when was the last time? And I'm thinking, it's been a while. And then my second thought was, maybe I need to design a Masoji this year, so I can put myself into a situation to practice these principles we've talked about that Mark Devine has so eloquently spelled out and refined. By the way, this is the 3rd edition of his book.
Yeah, it's a good book, and it leads to great conversations. I think I've enjoyed this one, and I would bet that if you joined 2 other runners tomorrow and had brought this topic up, you would have equal conversation that's just interesting and fascinating, and there'd be a lot to be learned from it. So this was one that these 3 runners, you dropped in with us, but I know that you could have your own, and it'd be just as educational and entertaining.
Yeah,
and we're glad that you joined us on this Don's Book Club episode.
Yeah, I also love, you said it earlier, Scott, but it's clear to me that Mark Devine follows some of the principles of Stoicism for sure. I thought as soon as I started reading it, I was like, the obstacle is the way immediately popped into my mind as well. It's like he is using these principles, and it's cool to see just how powerful those tools can be when you start to really try to harness them in your life.
And how
and he doesn't
eternal those principles are.
And he doesn't mention trail running at all, but there's so many applications, there's so many parallels with what we're doing. And of course, in any other hobby or activity, and maybe even in life, right, Scott? Maybe even in everyday life.
Hey, we're glad that you joined us. We apologize if you had a meeting that started 15 minutes ago and you only had an hour for the episode. If you did, make sure you just go back and hit play again. You can do it after the meeting. But we're glad that you joined us, and we think that this was a fun read. We hope that you learned something from it. Go out and get the book, because there's so much more that we didn't cover that I think will help you become a better runner in this book, in between these covers. So more importantly, though, did you have something, Don?
Well, I think we should acknowledge Adam, of course, for joining us, and he's a coach, and I just want to. Some people are listening to this and are thinking, "Man, I'd like to talk to Adam."
of the 3 guys I'm listening to, I want to hire Adam as
Well,
coach.
of course.
Where do they get a hold of you, Adam?
I don't want to talk to anybody, Don. I'm not sure why you're putting that out. No, I'm just kidding. You can reach out to me. AdamKimball.com is my website. And then AdamKimball818 on Instagram. Those are the 2 easiest ways.
Mm. Those will be in the show notes, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate it.
You bet. So if you enjoyed listening to this, what you'll enjoy more than anything else is to go out and run.
Mas.